Welcome to Discovering. Tonight we talk more about maintaining our forests for the future of wildlife.
We all should have a common understanding about the critical nature of doing things right in the forest community.
Plus, I met a young man who recently earned recognition as a distinguished expert in marksmanship.
It takes a lot of concentration and discipline to be able to consistently hit the targets.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
I was back with the Habitat group a few months later. The cutting was done and it was time to plant trees.
We're back here this spring and getting some trees in the ground in this deer winter range project. And this particular project is one that focuses on the areas that deer use as they're approaching the yards. It's sort of an intermediate zone of the deer yards. The main deer yard is about a mile east of here, but this area holds deer in November, December, and January, depending on how much snow there is on the ground. So these are really important areas because they allow deer to get around and feed on pretty good quality browse. But what was lacking from this stand was a good conifer understory. That conifer understory intercepts snow, and therefore deer don't have as much deep snow to go through, and they can utilize their food much more effectively and efficiently.
Well, we're out here today, we're planting for deer habitat. So what encompasses a deer habitat planting is an understory. These hardwood stands out here have been thinned, and we're coming back in to create some canopy and some cover to provide thermal cover for deer during the winter yard. Here we're looking at a balsam, we're looking at white pine, white spruce. These are shade-tolerant species that'll get up and create a cover that'll keep snow levels lower that deer are able to move around through the winter. The white pine is a real good one. It's a long-lived tree, hundreds of years. Some of the other species aren't quite as long. Get a huge canopy, a good industry tree. Then underplanting of white pine allows the white pine to stay above and stay out of the white pine weevil. Being a shade-tolerant species, the shade creates a thinner main stem, and the weevil doesn't get into that stem. And that stem's doing is pushing toward the upper canopy. Thus it goes faster, and thus it stays thinner. Weevil won't get into it, and you'll end up with a straight white pine as opposed to an open-grown white pine, which then ends up a big shrub. The white spruce and the balsam are both shade tolerant and will both run up along with the white pine. All three of these will grow very well together, and they'll, as we've seen all of these, they're evergreens and they will create a big needle canopy. With the underplanting that we're doing out here, we're using a product that is a containerized seedling. Everybody, I think, for the most part, will be familiar with bare root seedlings where you see an exposed root system. We're using containerized seedlings out here. You've got a plug, also known as a plug, and for the obvious reason, it's a plug of dirt. The root system is all tied up in that plug of dirt. You end up with 3-4 times the amount of root system in this plug. It's an easier product to plant, but with all that extra root system, it's a better surviving product. The growability, getting this tree up as fast as possible, getting it above its competition, is what we're looking for in any sort of seedling planting. And with these, you get a 90–95% survivability, as well as that extra growability, which pushes those trees to survival.
One of the interesting things about this site was we were actually able to work with the logger while this site was getting harvested. So a lot of times when we identify private lands that we want to work on, we're going in, they'd been harvested 10, 12 years ago, and there's something about them that needs to be fixed. We need to do some site prep to prepare for the tree planting. That could be forestry mulching with a skid steer where you're grinding up the brush, or doing some sort of chemical treatment. But if you're getting in there right after the site's harvested, like it was this last winter, you can work with the logger to tailor it to how you want to plant. So we worked with Shamco and their forester, Kurt Lehman, to build in canopy gaps into this hardwood stand, and also thin it to a lower basal area, a lower density, where we could plant throughout it, but really focus our planting in the canopy gaps that this logger prepared for us. We hope to do this more often because it's just a much more economical way to get these projects accomplished.
Over the last 50 years, conifers have been removed from this stand. First, the white pine was removed, and then systematically the hemlock has been removed. So we're reinstituting that conifer component in the stand. And within the next few days, there's going to be 45,000 seedlings put in the ground here under this northern hardwood stand. 15 or 20 years, there's going to be a good understory that intercepts snow, and this will be a fine area for deer again. We had mentioned before how important the logging industry is to the economy of the Upper Peninsula, and I look at it, certainly agree with that. And not only is it important to the economy of the Upper Peninsula, but it's important as a critical part of our culture. Not only our culture as being woodworkers, which many of us have been in our lives, but it's important to our enjoyment for wildlife. A lot of people in the Upper Peninsula love to have camps, cottages, and so forth, and a lot of the reason that they own land themselves is because of the wildlife benefits that it provides. Forestry, if done carefully and with a full consciousness of the needs of wildlife, can provide that sustainably into the future. So, I look at the forest industry as the driving mechanism for our wildlife resources in the Upper Peninsula. When you consider the Upper Peninsula specifically, one of the things that concerns me especially is that we don't have enough coordination between the major landowners up here to make sure that we're providing the resources for the economically important wildlife species and the culturally important wildlife species that we want to manage for. So you have federal forest land. They're a major player up here. You have state forest land, another major player, and you have commercial forest reserve land, of which we have about 2 million acres in the Upper Peninsula. And then on top of all that, you have privately, individually held lands that are owned by people like you and me. So those are the major land ownerships, and we've never had good coordination between all those ownerships. A corporate landowner may be managing for one thing, the state managing for another, private individuals for another. Some of our recent work has been to try to increase understanding between the groups of landowners, that they have a role to play in the maintenance of our culture, in the maintenance of our economy, and specifically in the maintenance of wildlife resources for the future. So that's really the heart of what our Habitat Work Group has focused on in recent years. Climate change is a reality. The Earth is warming. And when it does, in this area, in the Upper Peninsula, what that means to us, one of the greatest impacts is some of the tree species that we have here now, 30, 40, 50 years from now, are not going to be doing very well. They may be on the way toward disappearance. The other thing is that with warmer temperatures, the chances that Lake Superior freezes over in the wintertime are going to become less and less. And when that big lake is not frozen over, it contributes to snowfall. The longer the big lake is not frozen over, the more snow we're going to get, generally speaking, during our winters. And the winters we had in 2012 and 13 were examples of that. Extremely cold weather came into the northern Great Lakes area, high north winds and an open Lake Superior, and we had tremendous snowfalls and tremendously cold weather. That's likely to happen more often in the future, and when that does, it can greatly affect wildlife, and especially those species that need shelter from winter conditions up here, and most specifically white-tailed deer. You know, black bear are fine. Moose can get along in very difficult winter situations, but white-tailed deer can't. I feel, and there are many of us that feel, that the future for white-tailed deer in the Upper Peninsula and everything associated with whitetails in the UP is going to depend on our ability to establish and maintain conifer shelter for those animals. That's going to be the critical component of maintaining deer in the UP in the future. There's always going to be differences in goals of what landowners have for their own property, and that's as it should be. But we need to come to some basic understanding that maintaining northern hardwoods in a good, healthy condition by proper forest management is critical, not only to you as a landowner, but to all of us. If you don't think it's important for you in your life, how about your children and grandchildren? Would you like them someday to have some of the experiences you've had? It's possible to lose all of it. And we could lose all of it by not paying close attention to how forests are managed. We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to our children and our grandchildren to be knowledgeable about what's going on these forest lands. Even though that acre out there may belong to somebody else, what he does with his land is important to me, and it's important to all of us. I'm not at all saying that we all have to look at things in the same way. I'm just saying that we all should have a common understanding about the critical nature of doing things right in the forest community. And you know, forestry and wildlife management, forestry especially, is over 100 years old as a science. Wildlife management is about 70, 80 years old now as a science. And together, those two sciences should provide us just great direction on what our options would be here in the UP. I'd like us to focus more on those kind of things, because I think we live in a special place. We have a special culture that is worth sustaining. And the only way that we can sustain it is through cooperative efforts in forest management.
The precision it takes to shoot a dime-sized target 10 times in a row takes years of practice.
You just gotta focus really hard, control your breathing, control how you hold the gun in the same spot every time.
And it takes a place to practice, like the Negaunee Rod and Gun Club.
Around the late 70s, we added on an indoor range at this facility, and then we started up a junior rifle program. Since the Negaunee Rod and Gun Club began the junior rifle program, there have been 6 junior shooters that have reached the distinguished expert. Luke is the latest.
Distinguished expert is the highest level of marksmanship a youth can achieve. 17-year-old Luke Appelkamp started shooting at the club when he was 12.
Me and my dad had nothing to do on the weekends during the winter and school year, so we just came out here one night and I enjoyed it, so I just kept going.
The junior rifle program is supported through the NRA as well as the Negaunee Rod and Gun Club. And as such, when the youth get their certificates for progressing through the different stages of the junior rifle program, they will get certificates signed off by the NRA.
Kids learn the skills they need to progress through the stages from Robin and other coaches here at the club.
I learned how to like steady my body and like so I'm not shaking as bad when I'm shooting, because you have to like really concentrate and because it gets wobbly.
My coach is really nice and he tells me when I mess up on something or he'll give me more bullets when I run out of bullets.
The youngest shooter, 9-year-old Lacey, her goal is to shoot her way to distinguished expert.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get up to the distinguished expert.
Nice. How much work do you think that's going to be?
A lot of work.
But look, that was your first shot down there, but your other two were very good.
Yeah.
That was your third shot.
The courses of fire are designed to take new shooters like Lacey from beginner skill level up to what Luke has accomplished.
The junior rifle program encompasses 4 positions. The shooters will start off as a prone shooter, work their way up through the progression, and then shoot from sitting, then kneeling, and finally standing. Standing, you're using a peep sight. You're shooting at a very small target from 50 feet. It takes a lot of concentration and discipline to be able to consistently hit the targets.
Not only do they have to score once, shooters have to do it 10 times for each level.
When a junior shooter starts off, they'll be shooting at these types of bullseyes. The center ring is for practice warm-ups to make sure the rifle is sighted in. And then when they shoot for score, they put 1 shot on each bullseye. When you start off, you can drop a few points on these targets, but as you progress with the program, it puts a premium on accuracy. You must become more accurate.
For the first one, prone, I shot for I think maybe a few months and got it done relatively quickly. And then I went into sit-in, and that one I think I took another year to get done. And then once I got to kneeling, that's when it got hard, and that took me a little while to finish. And then standing I went through, and then I had to start it all over again with expert.
Once they've completed that level, then they move on to what we call the distinguished expert level. They go back to the prone, sitting, kneeling, and standing positions, but the targets require them to shoot more precisely. It is basically the same target, but it's down to 5. The difference is you now must put 2 shots into each bullseye.
I go through, shoot one, and then move on to the next one, and then just go shoot them again. And you can only get -4 on it. And if you get like -5 on one of the 5 targets that are on it, then the whole target's scratched and I have to move on to the next one.
Keep in mind, you're shooting with a rifle that has peep sights. It's not a scope.
I started out with smaller .22 guns, and those are the guns that the club supplies for the junior rifles. And once I got to expert standing, Robin gave me his son's gun that he used, and so I was shooting that, and I scored a few times. But then the season ended last year, and so I came back this year, but my dad got me a gun, so that I started shooting that one.
Luke shot his final target last week.
It felt good. I knew I scored because when you're shooting so long, you learn how to like know if you pulled the gun and like shot off, or you just know. And so I knew I scored, and I was like happy, and we went down there and checked it out, and I did.
We've had more than 200 shooters come through the program, but the key point is the difficulty for achieving distinguished expert. That's why we've only had 6. It boils down to being a personal challenge, because once you get to the highest levels, that is when it really becomes a personal quest for the shooters.
I like that it challenges me, and it makes me work harder and makes me stronger.
I'm not sure what's next. I might go shoot out competitions, but I'm not sure. I'll probably shoot with my dad still, just have fun with him.
The program is open to kids age 10 through their senior year of high school.
The season for the junior rifle runs from the first Wednesday in December all the way through the first week of April. There is a small fee because everything is provided to the shooter. We have rifles, We provide the ammunition, the targets, the shooting jackets, the mats, and the gloves that they use, plus the important stuff, the eye and ear protection.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.